everybody. My name is Rob Napa, and I'm the Director of Estimating Products at the Accordant Company. And I want to thank you all for joining us this morning on our Building Information Modeling, our BIM presentation. And I would like to introduce our presenter today, and that is Paul Asnikar. He's something of our BIM expert, and I'm going to turn this right over to him in a minute and let him show a brief PowerPoint first on the whole concept of BIM, Building Information Modeling, and estimating integration. And then he's going to get into software and show how 3D modeling and estimating, SAGE estimating, works in conjunction with one another. Now you're all muted for the time being, and at the end of the presentation we will unmute you so that you can ask questions. We're going to take about an hour to do the presentation, and then when we unmute, just start firing some questions and we'll answer them as best we can. Again, thanks for joining, and now I'll introduce Paul Asnikar. Paul, it's all yours.
All right, Rob, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and appreciate the opportunity. Well, good morning, all. And, you know, one of the things in talking with Rob and putting this together, there's a lot of different directions we can go here, but what I decided to do is again, not knowing everybody in the audience in terms of their experience and expertise on BIM, is kind of wanted to break this into several chunks. And one of the first aspect of it is I want people to have a good common understanding of what is BIM and what it means to the industry. And then I'm going to dive in and talk about, you know, kind of the basics of our core estimating application, Timberline, SAGE Timberline Estimating, and then talk about how we leverage from being able to pull that information into our Timberline spreadsheet, and how does SAGE Timberline leverage from BIM. So kind of a three-part presentation here, and the PowerPoint kind of flows that way. So, and then like Rob said, afterwards we can dive into some questions and address whatever. But essentially what I wanted to start with, like I said, is kind of what is BIM? I've had people come up to me, you know, you want to jump right in and talk about how it works with Timberline. So essentially, you know, as I roll through a couple of these slides, and by the way, this is the your point of contact here at Accordant, like Rob Napa. You know, one of the best, I think the best slide that I could find here, and as we were putting this together, is that when people ask you what is BIM, BIM means lots of things, and if people have a common, just get a common understanding of what it does, is that if you look at applications like Revit, for example, think of Autodesk's product Revit is kind of the mothership, if you will, and instead of designing in a 2D fashion, you're actually designing in the 3D world. Well, what that does is it opens up, when they call it objects, and take for example, an object might be a door, a wall, a roof system, you know, could be lots of things, but basically it's what's being programmed into that design in a 3D world. And every object has numerous attributes, all kinds of information that can be keyed in. And so when you look at this slide and people say, what is BIM? Well, the advantage of going from a 2D to a 3D world is the 3D world, as I mentioned before, allows you to put in all kinds of attributes about an object again being a door, as an example. But as you put all that information, could be manufactured, could be, you know, the website links, could be energy efficiency information, you know, the dimensional aspects of it. And so what that does for companies that utilize the BIM is it means lots of things. So if you look at this diagram here talks about all the different ways BIM can benefit a company, anywhere from, you know, working on conceptual high-level design to, you know, you might have heard of tools like Navisworks. Navisworks is a conflict resolution where when you run, you know, you might have your piping, your ductwork, your drywall, and you want to see where there's conflict resolution and to deal with all that, you know, way up front to avoid a lot of RFIs. There's energy efficiency calculations that are driven off of this. Obviously, quantity takeoff, cost estimation. There's tools such as an application called Synchro, and Synchro ties your actual model objects to a Primavera schedule, and you can visually cash flow and see your building being built in front of you. So there's a lot of things that feed off of that object when it initially goes into the Revit design. And so that's this slide here. And by the way, the last slide that I'm going to show, or one of the last slides, has all kinds of links. And Rob is more than welcome to send this out to everybody that attended today. And so it's not just about Sage Timberline. There's all kinds of information you can go into with the website links like Synchro or Navis and so forth. So that's what this slide talks about. And, here's a couple slides. You have the energy analysis as an example, clash detection here, where it's showing different, where you have to rerun the pipe where you've got a conflict here. This is the application Synchro, which ties your Primavera, as I mentioned, to your model objects, and you're able to see your project being built in front of you. And again, with this application, if you put some cost to it, you can actually cash flow visually. And so that's kind of the basics of what is BIM. Now, as we dive into saying how does Sage Estimating or Timberline Estimating leverage from this? Well, and when you go through that, and I'm going to dive in, before I go into the BIM applications that drive our Sage Timberline spreadsheet, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the core estimating and show a couple things within the core so you kind of get an appreciation. But the way we work with BIM technology really mirrors the way our estimating application is set up. And what I mean by that is Sage Timberline is a database spreadsheet application. And that database is nothing more than it starts out as a book of information. You might have some pricing in there, the cost of a door. You might have an assembly that says, well, I want all the pieces and parts that make up that wall, from the drywall to the metal studs to the insulation and paint. We have tools in there that also allow you to say how big, how tall, how many stories is this building, and as we answer those questions, it drives all that. So our way of leveraging from BIM really mirrors the different ways that we can generate items into the spreadsheet, anywhere from an item to an assembly to what we call a cost model. So if you look here on the pre-construction side, we've got the schematic, design, development, and construction documents. There are tools out there in the BIM world today that really flow with that. Those tools in these three areas really flow more on dealing with Revit details, such as applications like Innovia that I'm going to show today, what we call Innovia's visual estimating. There's applications QTO, Autodesk QTO. There's other ones out there that we might be working with downstream as well that are really feeding from that Revit detail. As I roll into the conceptual phase, there's an application like what we call written by Beck Technologies called dProfiler. dProfiler allows you to connect the Timberline database at a conceptual level and being able to open up and have maybe a box that's the building and be able to stretch it and make it higher and drop in things and run energy analysis and drop in topos and work with it at a high level conceptual. And as you put that together, it's building a Timberline estimate. And so when you look at this area here in these four segments, that really is how we work within the core estimating application regardless of BIM technology. So, and a couple things here. There's a slide of the dProfiler application I'm going to show here in a minute. There's a slide of the Innovia, which is working more with the detailed Revit information. And people ask, what's the benefits? And I've had the luxury and kind of got lucky here on some of these consulting jobs where I've been able to dive in and work with the BIM technology. And I think the biggest thing here is it gives companies another tool to utilize. Like the project I was on, it didn't stop us from looking at the drawings and being able to put in some other things to supplement, maybe because BIM is a lot like a set of drawings. It's not necessarily going to be everything that's being designed in there, but you can certainly leverage from the good things that are in the Revit model. On the project I was on, we had some really good information on structural and a lot of good things on a lot of the architectural trades, and we were able to leverage from that. But I think the biggest thing to me that I'm finding out there is that it's really forging a great relationship with the architects and where you're really trying to communicate back. And I've got a customer of mine that said they've taken the process from, they used to take 2 weeks to produce a set of drawings to 3 days, and And really what it's also done too is, as I mentioned, it's forged that relationship with the architect. The architect, when they move on to another project, maybe a similar product, they want to be able to continue to work with, almost creates that design build, working directly with that architect, and it's kind of their job to lose, so to speak. And so, we're finding a lot of that going on. But I think, for me, that when you look at these applications as it relates to helping on the estimating and quantity and cost generation, it's really it's a great communication tool to be able to circle back and talk to the architect and ask what this means. Maybe they can revise the model so that, the next time it flows back through, we've got a better way to generate. You can instantly see changes that are inside the 3D design from a previous set of drawings, so I go back to communication. And then I guess, the last thing that I would say is that it's not a replacement, but it's an additional tool. As I mentioned, the project I was on, we had the ability to use the BIM modeling and be able to generate and say, where is that Revit model to date based on the drawings that we're receiving from them. In addition to that, there might be a need to do some spot checking with on-screen takeoff 2D application because some of the stuff isn't designed. But it's such a nice check. We had the ability to verify quantities off the structural engineer when he was coming in with a certain yardage, and within a few hours we were able to generate 4 buildings worth of structural concrete, 4,000 yards of concrete in a couple hours. So it's that kind of information and quickly be able to generate that stuff. So, not to go too deep, but currently today, as you look at the Sage Timberline platform and that application, we have 4 roads, three roads, soon to be 4 roads. We work today. There's 3 applications that are more Revit-based driven, and the 4th one is the conceptual, which is the D-Profiler. When I say 3, today there are 2, and that's Autodesk QTO and Innovia. There's another one that's building an interface to ours. It's called Assemble, and it also deals with the details of the Revit model. So when I say others, Sage Timberline is opening up their application. They've got what we call an API or a software developers kit, and really it's the instructions to allow other vendors out there. And our philosophy is, there's some that we work with today, but there might be a great mechanical one that comes available that we're not aware of. So instead of making a marriage to specifically one BIM solution, we're trying to leverage from the folks out there that have done a good job, and especially as it seems like numerous Revit developers enter the market, and I think there's probably on average maybe half a dozen that seem to keep entering. We don't know which ones are going to be the top of the heap, and we make our application open for that. So hopefully that makes some sense. Here's the links that I was talking about when Rob sends this out to you. There's a lot of good information out there that you can go kind of learn above and beyond what I'm talking about with Sage. So now I'm going to dive in to the estimating application. And before I go into the BIM world, I want you to get kind of an understanding of what estimating does without that. And if you look here, I've got an estimate spreadsheet right here. And it's, as I mentioned before, it's a database spreadsheet concept. And that database is nothing more than opening up a book and driving things into a spreadsheet. So I use the door example. If I go into openings and go down to wood doors and I want to say a wood panel door, I can just drag that in. Again, I'm not doing anything with BIM right now. I just want you to get the understanding of it all starts out with kind of a book of information. This database is completely definable, modifiable, unlimited in length. I've got a customer of mine that has over 1 million lines in their database. Not saying that's going to be your database, but the concept here is being able to build this book the way a company wants. It could be built on CSI 95, could be on 2004 uniformat, or completely customizable. The whole concept of as I drag stuff in, that we can quantify things, and if you go over here and say, I disagree with that price, I want to make that $700, or I don't know, make this $1,500, it back calculates. I can override things, and again, I'm working in a database spreadsheet concept. Now, I mentioned to you earlier is there's different ways to get information out of the database and into the spreadsheet. They're just roads that drive the spreadsheet, and if you look here in between these lines, there's different ways to pull that data and drive the spreadsheet. We have items, assemblies, and models. So if you look at the assembly, instead of, let's say we're dealing with an assembly like a wall, or even a door assembly could be things. So if I go in here to a wall and I open this up and you see there's questions here. Again, everything you're seeing is definable, modifiable, unlimited length. So if I said, hey, this is 700 feet, maybe the height of the wall is 12, I have questions here, pad insulation, you're going to have chipboard required, and you'll notice as I answer these questions, it intelligently rolls out other things here that, I might want to. So if I said, hey, make that 10, 2 layers of rock, the chipboard is fine, I'm going to paint the wall. I also can attach pictures that help me understand what that is. And again, just giving you the basics of what's inside our core estimating application. And again, I didn't have to go to the database here. These are all the items that are inside the database, but instead of dragging them line by line, as I answer these questions, it drives all that information. When I hit OK, it drives the spreadsheet. So if you look at, I'm going to stop right there for a moment. If you look at the items and assemblies in here, that list here, or this list of assemblies, those are really how we drive. When I go back to that PowerPoint slide and we talk about, in fact, maybe that's a good place to go back here. If I go back here to this PowerPoint and we talk about these 3 areas, that's really how we work with when I start tying with Revit. Revit works and feeds off the details. So that's where you start talking about the likes of Autodesk QTO, Innovia, Assemble, others coming that feed off that Revit information. The conceptual phase of it, when I say mirroring estimating, is really more of our cost modeling. And the cost modeling is saying, hey, I don't have a set of detailed drawings and documents or specifications. I want to be able to come in here and as I open up that, box retail, for example, maybe I say this is building A. I want to attach some pictures here and kind of go down a list of questions. I'm not dealing with footing schedules and wall schedules and that kind of information and the different door types that are out there. I'm answering merely, hey, this is a 50,000 square foot building. It's don't hold me to these values. I'm just typing in some stuff. But you get the idea is that I fill things in here. And as I fill out this information here, now what it does is it drives all the pieces and parts. And again, this is our cost modeling. And the reason I'm bringing this stuff up to you is, like I was saying earlier, is that it really mirrors the way we work with the Revit or the BIM world, if you will. In this case here, this really kind of mirrors how we work with dProfiler. And if I hit OK here, it just goes off and generates a cost estimate that at a high level. So in this case here, I didn't have to go to the database and drag all this stuff in. It drove all that for me. So just some basics about this. So now, if you kind of understand our database spreadsheet concept within the walls of the core program, then we start venturing out into these different platforms. And as it relates to BIM, which is today's obviously topic, there's other things we can talk about today too. But if I close this out for a second, this is where we start getting into, well, how does BIM relate to estimating? So if you understand that, all we're doing now is we're taking our database information and making it available into these different BIM platforms, okay? And so, for example, if I, at a detail level, if I open up here as an example that I'm going to show today is more of the visual estimating from Innovia, I'm dealing with, and again, what I'm showing here is those. If I go back to that PowerPoint, I don't mean to be jumping around here, but if you look at these 3 areas here, this really is what I'm working with as it relates to the Revit model and the details. And this application really does 2 main things. It's a huge communication application, but it's also, of course, connecting that Timberline database to drive our spreadsheet. So, for example, here, from a communication standpoint, if I just drew a line right down the middle of the screen here, this is really the communication side of things. So, and if I want to come in here and I want to walk towards it and understand, we're going right into the Revit application, and we're publishing all the objects out of Revit and right into this application that can connect to Timberline. So if you look here, I can come in here and I can spin the model and move it around. I can turn things on and off. If I wanted to go down here and say, let's turn off the exterior windows, I can dive in and out. And at any time, as I'm working with this, I can go up here to communication and just take a snapshot. In addition to that, as I'm working with this, I mentioned before, as we're taking the stuff out of the Revit model, and I want to be able to try to communicate changes, there's an ability to go in here and say, show the design stage status. And as I do that, you can see instantly that in 3D, this information shows me what's physically changed. And the way I've got my color coding is, you know, red is new, blue is existing. Blue's been deleted, something yellow is something's changed. And if I come down here, you'll notice they've added that the building name, or in this case building A. They've added that because of what happened in Connecticut, so that the helicopters can quickly move. So that kind of stuff is flushing out just by being able to reference a previous set of drawings. So again, we would go in here and we look at this information and say, you know, I want to take a snapshot of that and send it out into Excel or Word and explain to the architect what's going on with all this stuff. From the sake of, a lot of times people would ask me, hey, you know, can you show me the wall types? Well, if you look here, this is the ability to turn things on or off. And this is working with what they call the Revit components, which is kind of a standard library. And if you look over here, this kind of mirrors, if I come down here, almost a set of drawings. If you look here, there's architectural, there's structural, so forth. But now what you look at here is, this is kind of a standard library of components. And then underneath that, you'll notice here are the details of those components. So if I was to go in, for example, to interior walls, you'll see that all the walls are highlighted. Well, if I open this up, you'll notice here too that shows the object of all those walls, so I can get. And again, I talk about communication. I come over here and say take a snapshot. So if I come over here, these are all the different wall types that are available inside this building. So if I went in here and clicked on one of these, you'll see that highlights those specific walls. It shows you what that wall looks like. So again, we're still dealing with communication side of things. And the other thing that we would do a lot of is we'd like to visually see in a color-coded way all the different wall types and then be able to publish that out so people can communicate. So if I clicked on this here and you see all the list of the quantities, I can actually do this thing called use color. And if I go in here and say color, I can just go right down the list, and it shows physically all the different wall types, all color-coded, and I can print out an image legend of what those are, and you know, quickly be able to show the different types of walls out there and their information. And again, you'll notice as I was scanning through that, it's actually building this information over here. So again, as you look at this application, from a communication standpoint, being able to dive into the model and understand what the model's doing and be able to color code things and show design change status, there's a lot of stuff we can get out of this regardless of connecting it to the database. But so as we look at it from that angle, then now as we learn the model, we have the ability to start connecting that Timberline database. And if you look here, see where it says Timberline? I've already created an estimate here, but you see where it says takeoff. Remember the quick takeoff and assembly takeoff and model? Those are the different ways I was talking about a moment ago back in the core estimating. And so, for example, if I was to open up this assembly, now the database, which is what you're seeing over here, is available to me inside of BIM. And if I take a wall type, for example, and just drag it over, this is where the two worlds, you know, come together, where here's the information about that object. And I was talking about some of the first things I said right at the beginning of the presentation is, you know, the Revit has the ability to have all this information that you can connect up to and use it in different ways. In our way, we're able to take a lot of those attributes we want to work with, and we start training the model to work with our assemblies. Now, the reason this instantly came up is I've already trained it. But the concept of this is going into our library of assemblies, and again, you can organize this however you want. and being able to just kind of drag and drop things. And as I do that, that questionnaire that I was showing a minute ago back in the core estimating comes into BIM. And so as I train the model and drag and drop things and answer questions, well, what it does now is as I accept that and I hit check and I say take off, I can also say take off all, and it'll go grab all those 4-inch, that wall type B4. But if I close this out for a second, you'll see that there's my timberline estimate right inside of BIM. You know, and I can look at it different ways. Some people like to want to look at it by more of a systems uniformat approach. Other folks want to see it by assembly, you know, and so forth. So the concept here is now I'm working in Revit, and I can instantly see my estimate as I'm doing that. The beauty of this application, though, is that this is why a lot of these contractors, customers of mine, and including myself on the consulting side, have gone to this whole mode, because what they're doing is they're forging these relationships with these architects and getting these architects to really build the model in a way that the general contractor can extrapolate those quantities. Because once you've done this, it's burned into the database. So when I use the example of what used to take 2 weeks down to 3 days, is the architect realizes the advantage of being able to connect that database in a quick fashion and be able to design in a kind of a standard way. And if they can, all you're doing is connecting that database, because once you burn this information into the Timberline database, you can go right in here and say auto takeoff, and as you do that, you just say go get all the objects. And this is the example I was referencing to, where I was able to take off 4,000 yards of concrete in a couple hours. I trained the model on a previous set of drawings, and so that information, you're really working in grabbing that, generating that quickly, and then really working with, if you see down here in the bottom right or the bottom left, MQs without cost, what you're seeing here is, in this case here, I still have a few things that, you know, maybe I don't even care about, but what I'm doing is, as I get new revised models and that information, I just run the auto takeoff, and it knows all that. So the new stuff that's been added, I'm just working without costs here and connecting that. So as I'm working in this, I can quickly and instantly generate those quantities and say, you know what, open estimate in Timberline. And when I do that, I talk about all roads kind of leading to the spreadsheet. You'll see in this case here, I hit OK. I didn't have to go through and drag all those items, nor did I have to, you know, if you've noticed, it flips by uniformat, or if I go to the component type, this actually shows me exactly how I took off from the model, which is I talked about the communication from a visual standpoint. Communication just inside the spreadsheet was huge for us too, because a lot of times you might work with the estimator, and he might say, you know what, I think that roof sweep is really going to be a metal ceiling, not something that's structural, and or let's communicate back to the architect. And so, in addition to just giving them a CSI or uniformat breakdown, we can organize this just exactly the way we took it off, so that it's easy to go back and understand, you know, oh, this particular object, we connected this Timberline data to it. And do we need to make some revisions to it? Do we need to communicate back to the architect? Again, we talk about the communication and quickly quantifying things, and that application handles both. And the QTO application, again, working also with the kind of the details. It's really reading more of a DWF file. So again, the whole concept with 3 of these applications we currently work with, Innovia, QTO, and then soon to be Assemble, all are kind of working with the Revit information in a detailed fashion. So whatever is being programmed in there, we can leverage from it and be able to cost it out. So that's kind of the first phase of this stuff as it relates to BIM. Now, I go back to kind of mirroring the roads of what we have in Sage Timberline in being able to say items, assemblies, and models. Well, the cost modeling component of it, where I was answering how big, how tall, how many stories, and if I go back to that PowerPoint slide and you see the conceptual phase here, that's that high-level design. So we work with another application from the BIM world called dProfiler, and what it allows us to do, be able to connect at a kind of a high level. Hey, I don't have any drawings. I want to kind of initially throw some things in here, You know, how big, how tall, how many stories. And so if you look here, I'm in D Profiler, and if I say open new project, you'll notice I can enter some basics about the project. I can put in a zip code, and if I put in a zip code, that'll give me the ability to also run an energy analysis. If you look here under building type, that could be a drop-down kind of mirroring the different kind of cost models you might have in estimating. But if I say office complex next, you'll see there's questions. And again, I'm using that example back in the core estimating, as this is kind of that high level. How many floors? What's the floor-to-floor height? You know, what's the parapet height? And as I'm filling out those kind of basics and high-level information, and then I go to next. You know, what's the shape of the building? Well, maybe we want to make this more of an L shape, and you know, we're kind of visually putting this together. What's the spandrel height? And then I hit finish. And there's a lot. I'm not going to go too deep in this, but I just want to give you kind of the basics and figuring we can spend some time on answering some questions. But right now it gives me a box. Well, that box at this point, as it goes in, based on the parameters we gave it, can instantly generate a cost estimate. In addition to that, we can look at that and say, well, based on how we answered the questions, let's run maybe an energy analysis, and it'll go off again based on that zip code and run that information. And you'll see it'll give me, you know, kind of an average monthly utility cost. If I go back into the spatial mode here, there's some other applications we can utilize. If I go into terrain, for example, I can launch Google Earth. Google Earth will open up. And I can come in here and type in an address. And it'll go find that address. I'm not sure about the delay that you might be getting, but if I go in here, move this up, I can move this down a little bit. So what I'm trying to do is find a plot of property off of Google Earth. You can bring in DWG files for 2D overlays, and if I want to zoom in a little more, I can say import topography. When I do that, it takes a picture of that, and it will drop it in to D Profiler. And you'll see it over here in a second. But the whole concept with this is now I can move this and I want to come into the building and I want to modify that. I want to move this. You know, if you notice here, there's information on the structure, there's information on the site. I can put in a parking lot and things like that. But as I'm working with this model, and I want to modify this, right now this is our estimate that I was showing, and this is coming directly from Timberline Estimating. If I come back here, you'll see there's the cost. If I go back into the spatial view and say, you know, I really want to stretch this out, make it a little bigger, you know, and again, I'm using that analysis of that cost modeling component over in estimating. How big, how tall, how many stories, stretch the building out, change things. And if I want to dynamically do that, you know, tilt the building, move it around. If you notice in the estimate, that gives me a new number. And if you look here, if I went into concrete, for example, you'll see that there's all this information that's being generated right from the Timberline database. Now, we're dynamically giving you costs, kind of like Innovia was giving you costs right within BIM off the Revit model. Same concept here. As I make changes to that high-level design, it's instantly connected to the Timberline database and gives me a price. Now, there might come a day where you, okay, I'm at the point where I really want to publish this out, print some nice reports, work more with the Timberline estimate, and all I do at this point is say export to a Timberline estimate. And now I give it a name. Hit save. And when I open this up, I just have to go to the directory, bear with me. There is my Timberline estimate. Right down to the assemblies that were published, unit format. So from the concept, the way we look at this is there's tools out there, and again, I focused on 2 today, and we have three soon to be 4 roads. There might be others we could be, and our philosophy, as I mentioned earlier, about having the API and the software developers kit, we might be talking here next year, and there might be 12 roads of them. But the concept of what we're really trying to explore up at corporate is the ability to say, how many different tools are out there that can help us drive that spreadsheet, which is why I took you initially to that core estimating and kind of walked you through kind of within the walls. And then once you kind of grasp that and we start moving it out, all we're doing is taking that Timberline database and training it to work in the different BIM worlds. We could be 2D worlds. We work with several applications in that capacity. Could be iPads downstream that we're going to be leveraging from. So it's really, and again, I know the focus today is BIM, but that's really the concept there. So, Rob, do you want to go ahead and unmute? I mean, I've kind of touched on a lot of the things I wanted to tackle today, in about 40 minutes. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add that you want me to include before we start opening it up?
No, I think you did a great job, and I'm glad that we have everybody muted because they're all probably out there just exclaiming that they can't believe that we can finally do this. So I can't wait to unmute this and hear what everybody has to say.
Okay.
Shall I unmute this? You
Hello. Hello. I'm getting a lot of.
Wow, this is tremendous.
Do you have the webinar coming out of your computer?
Let's mute everybody.
Let's. I have a telephone. Question?
We're going to have to mute everybody. Trying to see who it is.
That's better on my end.
There we go.
Okay. Are you there? Yes. Lord.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have whoever that is, the perpetrator, muted?
I do.
Okay.
Beautiful.
We had one question typed in. They want to know what version of Timberline this is.
Currently, the interfaces work with 9.7 and also 9.8. I'm using the 9.7 platform. There's not a lot of difference between 9.7 and 9.8, but they're both compliant.
That's the question. I couldn't see it. Now, maybe the file save as. So.
Okay. So do we have any questions? You guys can
shout
them out.
Yeah, shout them out.
Any questions on what we showed and talked about? Any things about Revit, BIM, estimating, forever.
I'm trying to fit
What was that? I think somebody had a question. Go ahead. No?
Nothing from anybody.
Rob, is there anything you want to throw out there that you want to add?
No, I can see on the list that we have some Sage Timberline users and some that aren't Sage Timberline users. And I would like to maybe have one-on-one conversations with those with everyone. So does anybody mind if I give you a call?
Yeah,
I'm wondering if anybody's out there listening to us at all.
I hope so. I think that would be your best bet at this point. Is there's like you said, Rob. There's people that have the estimating already, and maybe they're looking at trying to connect up with some of this BIM stuff. And I would certainly might be a good time to interject. Maybe looking at the folks' database and maybe how we can set it up so it can work in these with this kind of applications.
Exactly.
And then on top of that, there might be the folks that don't have estimating or any BIM information, and at least engage with them and kind of see how we might be able to help them. So, and again, please feel free to use me as a resource. If no one has any other questions, then I'm moseying on my way.
All right, I will. We've had to mute some folks because of that awful echo in the background, and I know who we've muted, so I'm going to give you a call.
All right. Hey, thank you ever so much. You guys have a great rest of the day and also a good weekend. And again, any questions, hunt me down.